Welcome to American Ultra Sports, a special presentation of Prime Network. From Telluride, Colorado, this is Daredevil Flyers 3, the Paragliders. This program is presented by Will's Wing.
Hi, I'm Rob Kells. Welcome to Telluride, Colorado, where we're here to take a look at some of the best pilots in the newest aviation sport in the United States. It's called paragliding. We've got some great pilots here. Rob McKenzie, who runs a flight school in hang gliding and paragliding in San Bernardino, California. Mike Meyer, a partner and principal in the company called Will's Wing that manufactures paragliders and hang gliders. Kerry Mendez, who also runs a flight school. All these guys are very highly experienced pilots with a lot of airtime. From Northern California, we've got Andy Whitehill, who runs a flight school as well and has a number of years of experience in both hang gliding and paragliding. Then we have Jochen Moslin, who is from Germany, has years of experience, and is a fellow that's just recently flown off the 14,000-foot Mount Whitney. We've got great pilots to show you here today. They're going to show you how to launch, how to land, and how to soar these things, and also some intentional collapses, which I think you'll see are pretty exciting to watch. Good to have you with us.
This program is brought to you by Will's Wing, a world leader in sport aviation. And by the Telluride Ski Resort, the most beautiful place you will ever ski. And by the Bank of Telluride. We're working hard to be your bank. And by Resort Rentals of Telluride, Colorado. For your vacation accommodations, call now. Welcome back to Daredevil Flyers 3, the Paragliders.
Okay, we've got two potential launch sites because the wind direction won't allow us in the low clouds to fly over on the higher mountain peak today. So we're going to try to do some launches down here below us, and then we've got a little bit higher launch we have to check out. We kind of got to pioneer both these sites today to see if we can get some flying, but we got some anxious pilots here, so we'll see what we can do. Here, let me grab one of those for you, Larry. What do you say? Let's go do some flying.
That waterfall is so scenic with the sun just peeking through the clouds.
Yeah, oh, when the sun comes out, this is going to be gorgeous. We're on our launch site on Tomboy Road, 1,000 feet above the valley floor in Telluride, Colorado. We'll be launching from an altitude of 10,000 feet above sea level.
Okay, thanks a lot, man. Appreciate it.
No smack. See you in a while. All that's going to happen is if we get just enough sunshine through some of these holes, it'll heat up the valley, and that'll allow the winds to come upslope. Right now it's crossed pretty bad from the left, and it'd be a dangerous launch. But all we need is some blue sky holes, get in front of the sun and heat up the valley, and then everything's going to come up both sides, and we'll be able to fly. I think we got about a 75% chance within the next hour or so. So we'll give it a shot. Pretty place to be stuck on launch, huh? One of the greatest things about paragliders is the glider, the harness, your helmet, and emergency reserve parachute all fit in a backpack. The whole outfit weighs less than 25 pounds.
And then hit it like this and run straight.
Here Larry and Andy are spreading out the canopy. They'll be inspecting the glider prior to launch.
Hey, it matches your flight suit.
Gotta be color coordinated. How you doing on that one?
I'm done.
Can you do this one while I slip into my harness? I think it's got some problems with it.
Here we see Larry Tudor putting on his harness. The harness is designed to be very comfortable for extended soaring flights. Sometimes we stay up for hours at a time in a given flight. He's reaching down and doing his leg loop buckles, and then he'll be doing a cross riser. Note on Larry's right side there's a brightly colored handle we'll be able to see here in a moment. That's his emergency reserve parachute system in the event of some kind of loss of control in extreme turbulence or in the event of a mid-air collision. All the buckles need to be adjusted securely and properly, and then he'll do his cross riser. Up here, if you've got a cross from the left, inflate here, and then little right brake and off this way.
Don't waste too much altitude around here because I got to the LZ yesterday with only about 300 feet.
300 feet. Larry's setting up here for his launch. He's holding on to what we call the front risers. That attaches the lines to the front of the canopy. He's also got brake handles in his hands for directional control. Very little running room up here on this launch. Makes it difficult. So he's going to back up to his canopy, give himself the best chance to gain flying speed before he gets to the drop-off on the end. The canopy gets pulled up over Larry's head. He runs down the hill, a little bit of brakes, and he's off. It appears that there's no lift for Larry to work this morning, so I think he'll be setting up his landing approach at the base of the hill in our alternate landing area.
I'm pre-flatting my harness right now, getting ready to launch. The wind looks much better. It's a little stronger, more up the hill, which is good. You want a little bit of wind to help you get started. And the pre-flight's really important when you're launching on a hill like this because there's not a lot of time to correct any mistakes. So you want to be really sure that the glider's going to be in flying condition by the time you pull it up. There's a few seconds you have to look up at the glider and make sure right away that it's going to fly correctly. So I'm going to spend a few minutes doing my pre-flight on the lines to make sure there are no tangles, and check my sail to make sure there are no lines going over the back. We want all the lines coming over the front of the glider so that it comes right up over my head. I want to make sure all my connecting links are closed and all the locks are closed securely, making sure that my brake toggles have no twists or tangles in them. Check my harness here to make sure all the straps here are not twisted. And I'll do the same thing for the other side here. Looks like it's going to be much better. Now we have a little bit of wind, which will help immensely on a high altitude launch like this. Everything here looks pretty good. Now I'm going to walk around the glider one more time and check it, and then put on my helmet and do one last pre-flight. How you lay the glider out really determines how well your launch will go. You want the center of the glider higher on the hill because you want the center cells to inflate first. Okay, I think this is it. We'll wait for a good cycle coming up the front. We don't want it too cross because that will fly only part of the glider. Maybe put a turn in it, so I want to make sure the wind's coming right in me, right up the hill. And we're going to watch for the cell that's moving through, make sure it's not going to start raining on us.
The beeping that you heard earlier from Andy is an instrument called a vario. Tells him whether he's going up or down. Notice Andy on that launch had to use quite a bit of right brake. His canopy got turned a bit sideways during his launch run. Looks like Andy has a little bit better air. You can see the trees are moving now, and it appears as though the conditions are getting better.
Good shoot, good shoot. Good shoot, Gary. Nice launch.
That was a real good launch. That's the best one we've seen so far this morning. I think Gary has a good technique, and he had probably more wind straight up the hill than Andy did.
I don't know.
Here Rob had to run uphill so he could launch the canopy into the wind, and then he turned the canopy right and managed to pull off a good launch. Looked a little shaky there for a minute, but worked out just fine.
One. Good, look clean. Good shoot. Run.
The Oakum's flying a higher performance design. You can see it has more span. It's pulling down on the right brake and headed for the other pilots in the alternate landing area.
We'll be back with more Daredevil Flyers 3 right after these brief messages.
Okay, up here to the left we've got another launch site we're trying, which is better than the last one because the wind is blowing right up it, which makes it easier to launch. The other hand, it's a little more difficult because it's quite steep and only suitable for highly experienced pilots. So we're going to give this site a try, see if maybe we can get some better flights. Well, Andy had a great launch considering how steep that hill was, and he's flying out to the Telluride Town Park. Andy's going to give us a view of what landing looks like. Fortunately, because this launch was higher, he comes out with more altitude. Paragliding's turning into a great spectator sport. It's a lot of fun to watch. Here Andy's reaching up and grabbing the outboard lines and pulling down on them and actually folding up some of the canopy. This is a maneuver we call big ears. By making the canopy slightly smaller, it increases the descent rate and also increases the forward speed. This allows us to set up landing approaches into tight landing areas more easily. By letting go of the outboard lines, the canopy reinflates by itself, and Andy's just using weight shift and brakes here to line up on the spot. Pull his hands halfway down, then all the way for a perfect landing.
8, 7, 6, 5, 4.
Here Larry Tudor pulls up on the same steep slope and another good launch. Again, remember these guys are launching from over 10,000 feet of altitude. There's less air up there. It makes it more difficult. Larry is the world's premier cross-country hang glider pilot and took up paragliding about 1 year ago. Larry actually in one flight flew over 300 miles in his hang glider. Launching from Hobbs, New Mexico, Larry declared a goal of Elkhart, Kansas, and 8 hours and 303 miles later landed in his hang glider at his declared goal. Larry's flying out here to Telluride Town Park. The park is a rather small landing area, and of course we're at pretty high altitude. Paragliders fly 5 to 8 miles an hour slower than hang gliders, and it makes precise landings a lot easier. Larry's looking at the spot, getting ready to set up his landing approach. Here he's going to do his turn to final. Use a little bit more brake and get her slowed down just a little bit more. He's looking at the spot, and you notice when he gets real close to the ground, watch his hands. He'll be pulling his hands all the way down for the final deceleration, called full brakes. And right about now, perfect landing, Larry. Okay, after Larry deflates his chute, he'll probably pull it up again and spread it out, get a little more organized. Then he'll pack it up in his backpack and get ready for his next flight. I got some lift on this flight and I have a great view of the valley. It's going to enable me to show you a maneuver called an A-riser fold. I reach up and pull down on one attachment riser, folding half the wing. The glider, as you can see, is still safely controllable. We practice this maneuver because sometimes in extreme turbulence the wing can collapse like this, and the pilot must practice it so he knows instinctively how to control the glider and what the correct inputs are to the brake toggles and what weight shift to use to continue to fly straight. This is another example of big ears, very easy maneuver to do, and also very stable. A good maneuver for setting up landing approaches. Now I'm not using the brakes here at all, I'm just shifting my weight in the seat, and by shifting my weight it causes the glider to turn. So there's two ways we can turn. One is by pulling the brakes and the other is by using weight shift. To reinflate the tips, all we have to do is just let go of the lines we pulled down. By using a combination of weight shift and brakes, we can turn the canopy at will. Here I'm setting up a landing approach. And I cross my legs because it's kind of comfortable to fly that way. It's sort of like sitting in a lawn chair. It also helps me to shift my weight from side to side. I'll get upright in my harness before landing. I've got little brakes on, and you'll watch my hands will come all the way down when it's time to touch down. And it's as simple as that. Now, while I pack up my paraglider, let's take a look at some of the legends of aviation, the Navy SEALs. The SEALs fly square parachutes, similar in appearance to paragliders, but smaller with a faster sink rate. They're designed for descending, whereas a paraglider is designed to use rising air to gain altitude and soar. The glide ratio of a paraglider is about 6 to 1. These square parachutes, the SEALs fly, glide at about 3 to 1. This is a two-man spiral, a pretty exciting looking maneuver which we don't do on paragliders. These SEALs put on a really incredible show with their smoke. They take a four-man stack with lines interconnected with their feet, and the bottom canopy flies into a drag plane. Bottom canopy is actually inverted. To end this maneuver, the two bottom canopies will let go of the two canopies at the top of the stack, and they'll go into a vertical dive, holding on to one another as long as they can. Then the canopies will split apart.
We'll be back with more Daredevil Flyers 3 right after these brief messages. Paragliding, the newest form of sport flying, is also the easiest way ever invented to take to the air. Your first flights will be from gentle slopes under the expert guidance of certified instructors. With more experience, you can advance to the scenic beauty of mountain flying. At Will's Wing, we are dedicated to designing and building the highest quality equipment for paragliding and hang gliding. Will's Wing products are distributed worldwide through an international network of retail dealers and flight schools. We've been building soaring aircraft since 1973. Our manufacturing commitment to quality is carried through the product design and development process and culminates in the individual flight testing of each aircraft we ship. See the yellow pages under hang gliding or paragliding for the Will's Wing dealer nearest you. The 8,000-member United States Hang Gliding Association provides services and representation on a national and international level to hang glider and paraglider pilots. USHGA programs and services include a pilot proficiency rating system, an instructor certification program, and an award-winning national monthly color magazine, all of which serve to further the goal of safe recreational soaring. The USHGA's insurance program is helping to ensure the continued availability of hang gliding and paragliding flying sites for future generations of pilots.
We're going to have Mike Meyer tell us about the first day of learning to fly a paraglider.
The first thing a student pilot needs to learn is how to pull up and inflate the canopy. This is done on flat ground, even before the pilot makes his first flight from a small hill. During the ground run, the pilot practices looking up at the canopy to check that it's fully inflated and make sure it's positioned fully overhead.
Now we're going to watch Mike from behind demonstrate turning control.
Turning the canopy can also be practiced at this stage. Pulling down on the right brake makes the canopy turn to the right. Putting the brake back up makes the canopy straighten out, and then pulling down on the left by pulling down the trailing edge of the canopy on the left side makes the canopy turn left. At the end of the run, pulling down both brakes together collapses the canopy gently behind the pilot.
Hi, Rob McKenzie. You've got a number of years' experience that I'm aware of in the hang gliding industry. Could you describe for us, I know you've been flying paragliders for almost a year now, what the transition from one form of flight to the other has been like for you?
Well, actually, it's been very exciting. The way the gliders are controlled is much different than in hang gliding. But the feelings you get up there, and I suppose the respect you have to have for the air and the approaches, it's a very direct crossover.
While the paraglider pilots are heading back up the hill for another flight, we're going to watch John Heine, one of the world's best aerobatic hang glider pilots. John's won the Telluride World Aerobatic Hang Gliding Competition a number of times. You notice in the front of his glider, he's got a boom, and mounted to that boom is a camera. John should be getting some spectacular footage here today. John's flying a UP TRX. He's about at the bottom of the aerobatic envelope now, so he won't be doing any more loops. Next, we'll see Larry Tudor, an incredibly versatile pilot. Larry flies tandem, cross-country, and has represented the United States in world-class competition for the last 7 years. Larry, age 38, has amassed over 4,000 hours in hang gliders. Here we see Larry thermaling. He's going to do some aerobatics for the World Aerobatic Competition being held here this week in Telluride. Unfortunately, the air was a little too rough, so Larry's just now trying to thermal up and gain altitude. In fact, it's not at all uncommon to find hang gliders flying altitudes up to 18,000 feet here in Telluride. Larry has used these same thermaling techniques to fly thousands of miles in cross-country. Next, we'll have a look at Aaron Schwepson, one of Will's Wing's top aerobatic pilots. Aaron's been competing in the World Aerobatic Championships here in Telluride for 4 years now and is a rigorous competitor. Here Aaron executes a near-perfect loop and goes into a dive. The dives get up to 100 miles per hour. This is a practice run for Aaron's competition this week, but the air is really quite rough. If you watch his smoke, you'll see that it gets blown around quite a bit. It's very, very difficult and indeed dangerous to be doing aerobatics in hang gliders when there's turbulence in the air. Aaron's attempting here to enter a spin, and it just starts to spin and then comes out. Again, very difficult to do aerobatics on hang gliders in this kind of air. Okay, here we have a free flyer coming in to land in the town park, and we can contrast this hang glider landing in the town park with the paraglider landings in the park you saw earlier. Because hang gliders fly a bit faster, and because, again, we're flying at 9,000 feet of altitude, it's not very easy to be setting up a landing approach into the town park. Telluride sure is one of the most beautiful places in the United States to fly. The Telluride Air Force puts on this, the largest hang gliding gathering in the United States every year, and has been doing it for years, since 1978. Now I'm going to take you for a flight on my glider. We've mounted a special camera so you can see what it looks like to be doing some aerobatics over the beautiful town of Telluride. To do aerobatics in a hang glider, we move our weight forward. You can see I'm pulling my body through the bar to get up to 75 or 80 miles an hour and then roll the glider to actually take it upside down. Some people could relate to this even if they've never done aerobatics in a hang glider, maybe your own self-made roller coaster. The G-forces can exceed 5, sometimes get as high as 6 Gs on a rapid pullout from a high-speed dive. Maneuvers we're capable of are loops, which is going straight over backwards, spins, and also varying types of wing overs. It's incredibly exhilarating to be able to do aerobatics and turn the world upside down. All aerobatic pilots love that. Unlike aerobatics in airplanes, there are no aerobatic hang gliders. All these pilots you see doing aerobatics are factory-sponsored experimental test pilots. It adds a great deal of danger to do aerobatics in hang gliders, and no production hang gliders are approved for these types of maneuvers. Next, let's take a look at another legend of aviation, Mitch McAleer, in his winning routine at Telluride in 1989. Mitch has retired from aerobatic competition after winning 4 World Aerobatic Invitational Hang Gliding Championships. This is really a beautiful routine to watch. Both Mitch's smokes are burning brightly and he enters a spin. After one turn, recovers the spin, and I think maybe he might go for another spin entry here. Let's see. Yep, he's got a good solid spin entry this time. You can see the smoke actually curling right up around the glider. This is one of the top aerobatic performances in a hang glider that I've ever seen. Here Mitch just executed a perfect loop. You see he went right back through his own smoke. He's going for a second loop here. Incredibly smooth routine by Mitch McAleer. It's easy to see how he went on to win the World Aerobatic Hang Gliding Championships in 1989.
We'll be back with more Daredevil Flyers 3 right after these brief messages. Welcome back to Daredevil Flyers 3, the Paragliders.
Rob, are you bringing your radio? You are. I think what we're going to find out there is a lot of turbulence. You can get on.
I think so too. That's strong as don't tell. It's probably really nasty.
Well, those guys were getting nailed. I mean, they just reported that they were getting nailed on the way down.
Is that why they didn't do any aerobatics?
Yeah, that's exactly
Well, I
right.
watched John, and he would look like he was really getting pushed around up there.
Yeah, and if you can see it from that far away, if you can see him
It's a lot worse than it
that
looks.
far away, it's a lot worse.
Yeah, let's go hiking. We can hike to the top. Oh, God, hang on,
Where's Waiter?
In search of more altitude, we took a hike up through the Aspens and found a launch site that was about 1,000 feet higher. This is going to give us a total of 2,000 feet over the valley floor so we can do maneuvers. Andy Whitehill had a good launch and is going to demonstrate a front horseshoe for us. He's getting set up and flying out so he's got enough altitude and clearance from the terrain. The front horseshoe loses altitude at a much more rapid rate. Andy's flying a Wills Wing 125. This is the largest size beginning intermediate canopy that we have. Here he pulls down on the lines. The canopy, the two wings fly forward and actually meet. And you notice his sink rate goes up pretty dramatically. We do front horseshoes to lose altitude at a more rapid rate in the case that we're getting sucked up into a cloud or the lift is too strong and we want to get down. Simply by collapsing the front of the canopy in the center, you see the two wings fly forward and the sink rate goes up. Andy exits the maneuver simply by pulling on the brakes, causing the wings to fly back and getting back into a normal flight mode. Andy's flying past the tailings ponds created by mining years ago in the town of Telluride. He's going to be setting up his landing approach in the town cemetery, Telluride's equivalent of Boot Hill, where some of the West's most famous gunslingers are buried. On the landing approach, it's always important to set up and be sure that you're going to have the proper terrain clearance, no power lines, and of course to stay out of the trees. Andy's got a good approach here set up, and we always land into the wind, making the landings much softer. He's shot his approach through the trees, and you can see a shadow coming up on the ground. Now he's just got a small challenge to land between the tombstones, and he's down for a perfect landing. I noticed when you came out over the park, Andy, you did maneuver, I believe it's called a front horseshoe. Could you describe that to us, maybe how you do it?
Yeah, Rob, the horseshoe is one of the best ways to lose altitude and come in a straight line. The designer I talked to back in January was very adamant that this is the best way to come in straight with losing the most amount of altitude while as you're setting up an approach over an LZ with a tight area. Over here we have very high trees and it's high altitude, so I want to come in with lots of speed, and what I do is I reach up around my risers and grab the forward A lines in the middle and pull it down slowly. The whole canopy then will collapse and the tips will come together in the center. It's very stable, it feels really solid, and it comes right out and there's no surge. It's one of the best ways I know to come down fast.
Now we're going to watch Mike Meyer, Will's Wing test engineer, demonstrate a full stall. Mike's trying to gain a little altitude because the full stall, as you shall see, loses altitude at a very rapid rate. The purpose of a full stall is to get out of an unrecoverable spin. Sometimes if during a wing collapse you get entangled, the maneuver of last resort is to go into a full stall. This maneuver you're about to see, Mike is going to enter intentionally. You'll see the trailing edge come down slowly, further and further, and a stall. Mike swings out in front of the canopy, and the canopy is fully collapsed. As it starts to spiral, Mike's going to let his hands up to institute the recovery. The canopy actually flies backwards for a moment, then surges forward. Mike uses the brakes aggressively to stop the surge and then recovers. After Mike's flight, we had a chance to talk with him about what the maneuver felt like.
Well, the institution of the stall was fairly normal, except my feet came up farther over my head than I expected. But by this time the stall is in a normal, stable state of descent. But I did pick up some rotation, so with not a lot of altitude to spare, I wanted to go for a gentle recovery. Went a little too gentle on releasing the brakes, and the canopy stayed in a stall and actually flew backwards. That made the resulting forward surge on final recovery also a little more severe than I intended. But with a heavy application of brakes, we were able to stop that and recover.
After this spectacular aerobatic demonstration, Mike comes down for a perfect landing.
Welcome back to Daredevil Flyers 3, the Paragliders.
Let's listen to Mike Meyer take us for a flight off Telluride's famous Gold Hill launch.
At 12,000 feet above sea level, Gold Hill is one of the most scenic launch sites anywhere in the world. Just off launch here with a camera on the glider, I'm working the lift right out in front of launch to try to gain altitude. Looking forward from the glider, we've got a beautiful view of the Telluride Valley, and the town of Telluride is located just over that ridge in front of us. Looking back up at the canopy, we can see how some of the maneuvers we've talked about are actually performed. Reaching up to grab the outboard 3 lines on the front riser on each side and pulling down folds in the wingtips in a maneuver we call big ears. This makes the canopy smaller, increases the descent rate and the forward speed. Releasing the lines causes the canopy to reinflate automatically by itself. If we grab the inboard 3 lines on the front riser, instead of big ears, we get the front horseshoe. where both wingtips fly forwards and meet in the center in front of the canopy. This reduces the size of the canopy to only about 1/3 its normal size and produces a greatly increased sink rate. Holding down on one brake causes a spiral turn, which some paraglider pilots refer to as a positive spin. In the view from the glider of the positive spin, we can see the clouds going by up above.
Taking the axis of rotation from the vertical to the longitudinal, here's another legend of aviation, test pilot Chuck Yeager, telling us how he got involved in flying.
Well, probably a pretty sorry start. I was raised in West Virginia, and I never saw an airplane on the ground until I was about 15 years old, and there was an airplane landed in a cornfield. I just looked at it and had no interest in it. So when I finished high school in '41, I enlisted in the Air Force as a mechanic, and then decided I'd like to be a pilot, and I applied for pilot training, and then went through flying school under the flying sergeant program, and got my wings and got to be a fighter pilot. So really, I didn't have any interest in airplanes.
When it gets too cold for flying in the winter, we come to Telluride for some deep powder skiing. Telluride has 2 of the 10 steepest inbounds ski runs in the entire United States. After a good snowfall, the powder skiing in Telluride is really fantastic. Big moguls and deep snow, it's a lot of fun. There's terrain for every level of skier, beginners, intermediate, and advanced in Telluride. Here's a map of all the trails and the layout of the lifts. You and your family can take a ride on this new 4-speed quad, get you to the top quickly. Skiing, like paragliding or hang gliding, gives you a great excuse to get out of the city and be in the great outdoors. It's a good way to relieve tension, skiing some moguls and deep powder. It's always great to be in Telluride in the winter or in the summer. The Precision Telluride ski team makes skiing look real easy. There are also a number of experienced telemarker skiers that ski in Telluride. Many members of the Telluride Air Force that work to organize the flying in the summer work here in the winter. Here's a view of beautiful 14,200-foot Mount Wilson, second highest peak in Colorado. Next year we'll have to paraglide from there. Here Rob McKenzie showing us how to ridge soar. When the wind blows into the ridge, it forces the air upwards, and this allows us to gain altitude after launch. Rob is actually doing some big ears maneuvers and trying to land back where he launched. You notice that Rob's flying very slowly and is taking advantage of the ridge lift and the rising air currents to keep himself up. Rob's about 300 feet above launch right now, about 11,000 feet above sea level. Here you can see how comfortable the harness is. It's just like sitting in a chair. We always wear helmets when we fly. Rob's going to demonstrate a spin for us. Gets the glider very slow, lets one hand up, and the glider rotates. In recovering from the spin, Rob pulled a little bit too much brake and actually spun in the other direction. Now he'll pull down both brakes sharply and recover from this spin, and the glider flies out. Rob's flying a Willswing AT-123. Here you can see how he's pulled down the trailing edge. This causes the wing to stall and spin around its vertical axis. Rob's looking up at the canopy during the recovery. Little bit too much brake and the canopy begins to spin the other way. Very tricky maneuver. Spins and full stalls are the two most dangerous maneuvers in paragliders. These are always practiced the first time at a high altitude using a life preserver over a lake under the eye of an experienced instructor and under radio supervision. Here Rob's happy he safely recovered from the spin, and he's actually flew right out of the spin and into a thermal. He's going up at 200 to 300 feet per minute here and is just circling to stay in the thermal. In many ways, I guess you could describe the feeling as being in a comfortable lawn chair going up under a balloon. If you look forward, of course, nothing obstructs your view, and soaring a paraglider is really why we fly them. We don't go out and do maneuvers all the time for fun to scare ourselves. This is what paragliding is really all about, is taking off, gaining altitude, staying up for perhaps hours at a time, landing right back where you launch, folding up your glider, putting it in the car, and driving home. It's a great way to spend an afternoon. There, Rob gives us a little wave. I think really this is going to be an environmental sport of the 90s. Of course, we don't use any kind of gas. We're just flying on uprising currents of air provided to us by the wind and the sun. Took the opportunity to go out and join Rob in this thermal, and because we're flying so slow, we can actually talk to one another back and forth in a normal tone of voice and hear each other quite well, much like riding a bicycle down the street next to a friend. You can actually have conversations. Rob and I are now thermaling up about 500-600 feet above launch where we took off. It's a difficult feeling to describe when you're up soaring, especially when you get to do it with a number of friends. It really is a lot of fun. Here Rob does the big ears maneuver and is shooting another landing approach in behind the trees. The launch was really steep, so it was a very difficult place to land. In fact, Rob thermaled up to about 1,000 feet above launch and landed several miles down the ridge and then took off and soared back up again. The view flying so close to the hill is really great. As we watch Rob working one last thermal, let's take a look at our last legend of aviation, New Mexico's aerobatic stunt pilot Jimmy Franklin. Here Jimmy's in the vertical and executes a slow roll. He's going to stop the roll and start a tail slide. Tail slides right back into his smoke, into a hammerhead. Wing walking was something exciting to see at air shows in the early 1920s, and Jimmy and his wing walker brought that back to air shows all over the country. Pushing the limits of design and continuously evolving, aerobatic flying of every type has been thrilling crowds at air shows since the beginning of aviation.
We'll be back with more Daredevil Flyers 3 right after these brief messages. Welcome back to Daredevil Flyers 3, the Paragliders.
Paragliders are the easiest to fly aircraft man has ever invented. But like any type of aircraft, to participate in this sport safely, you have to get expert certified instruction. A mountain flying site like Telluride requires an expert pilot rating to fly here safely. There are currently over 50,000 paraglider pilots in Europe, 10,000 paraglider pilots in Japan, but only about 1,500 in the United States. Paragliding really just came to the United States about 3 years ago, but it's growing in popularity very rapidly. Here our German pilot Jochen has found himself a nice thermal. You see, he leans into the left, pulls down slightly on the brake, and he'll just circle there and try to stay in that thermal and slowly gain altitude. Pilots with good thermal skills can use this technique to allow them to stay up for hours.
We'll be back with more Daredevil Flyers 3 right after these brief messages. Paragliding, the newest form of sport flying, is also the easiest way ever invented to take to the air. Your first flights will be from gentle slopes under the expert guidance of certified instructors. With more experience, you can advance to the scenic beauty of mountain flying. At Will's Wing, we are dedicated to designing and building the highest quality equipment for paragliding and hang gliding. Will's Wing products are distributed worldwide through an international network of retail dealers and flight schools. We've been building soaring aircraft since 1973. Our manufacturing commitment to quality is carried through the product design and development process and culminates in the individual flight testing of each aircraft we ship. See the yellow pages under hang gliding or paragliding for the Will's Wing dealer nearest you. The 8,000-member United States Hang Gliding Association provides services and representation on a national and international level to hang glider and paraglider pilots. USHGA programs and services include a pilot proficiency rating system, an instructor certification program, and an award-winning national monthly color magazine, all of which serve to further the goal of safe recreational soaring. The USHGA's insurance program is helping to ensure the continued availability of hang gliding and paragliding flying sites for future generations of pilots.
Rob McKenzie and I are here flying in our last thermal before it's time to pack it up and go load our stuff in the airplane and fly ourselves home to Southern California. As always, we've had a really good time flying here in Telluride. Our special thanks to Nick Kennedy and Hugh Sawyer of the Telluride Air Force for making this fly-in possible. We'll be back next year.
This program has been brought to you by Will's Wing, a world leader in sport aviation. And by the Telluride Ski Resort, the most beautiful place you will ever ski. And by the Bank of Telluride, we're working to be your bank. And by Resort Rentals of Telluride, Colorado. For your vacation accommodations, call now. This has been a special presentation of Tame Video of Telluride, Colorado. All rights are reserved.